Tonight, when I was talking to my husband outside by the garden, I said, I want to read something to you. I think it would actually make a good podcast. The reason being is that it's something that he wanted to know, of course, how it would tie into the podcast, because that's the kind of person that he is. So I said, well, it's about equality, essentially. I think that it's about understanding on a very deep, intuitive level. I think I'll need to say intuitive, like in every podcast, that life isn't fair. And I think we all recognize that. And it's a very difficult thing to recognize life not being fair. It's very difficult now, and we're trying to make things right, and in our society, we're trying to make it so things are fair. But I think it's impossible. And when I was a child, I knew this, and I think most children knew this, and it wasn't a bad thing. We didn't go around lamenting and feeling resentful. It was something that you were expected to, it was a reality you were expected to absorb somehow. And you did. So, but I think that my neighbor friend, Susie, she taught me about the troubles that we have when we have to see that life isn't fair. So this is my little story about my neighbor who taught me about the basic reality of inequality. So remember when you were a kid and you wanted a friend to play with you, someone close by you could access independent of adult intervention. Now, I was pretty lucky in this regard. When I was growing up, I had a girl my age, Susie, who lived right next door. She was the youngest in her family of 4. She had 3 older brothers who basically tormented her in every way possible. She might have looked up to me. Kids have this hidden internal pecking order nobody can do much about. And I never mentioned our ranking, as I was vaguely conscious that the existence of such a hierarchy was not so much unjust as simply beyond my control. Something about who we were had gotten laid into us before we could rejoice or even really complain about it. Sometimes I got the sense Susie looked up to me, but secretly hated us both for it. I was really kind of just a silly tomboy. I liked to climb trees, and she did too, and climbed on roofs and things like that. Anyway, I didn't enjoy being her official leader or unofficial leader. I don't know how my life would have been different if she had been the one who was supposed to lead the way. I was embarrassed to hold any advantage over her. When you're a kid, or the kind of kid that I was, you strive to make things equal, but not by turning yourself weak. You find yourself wanting your friend to be as strong as you are, to know not to be dumb, or to say things that will alert the authorities. My friend just didn't have that kind of sense. Susie didn't have that kind of sense. She sabotaged us. Sometimes it seemed she enjoyed getting in trouble. Time and time again, I forgave her, as neighbor friends do. When playmate selections are limited, as they were back then, you learn the critical importance of making up. When we were still young, I could see I had advantages over Susie, my friend. For instance, my mother baked delicious breads, pies, cakes, pastries, and I was allowed to share them liberally with others as if these delicacies were my own creation. Susie, on the other hand, did not have the run of the family's kitchen. When she finally came into possession of something coveted by other neighbor kids, an above ground pool. Her mother, I don't know what was going on with her mother, but her mother charged me and the other neighbor kids a disastrous fee to swim in it. It was something like 15 cents for half an hour, and the same price for a Dixie cup full of Kool-Aid. I don't recall her mother enforcing the admission fee. I think initially we did pay it, but over a very short period of time, we all somehow managed to mercifully begin to ignore the request and hope that the mom would come to her senses and see how her swimming and refreshment charges were destroying Susie, her weird daughter's already slim chances of ever blending in socially. There were other differences between Susie and me, fateful asymmetries coming between us. Though we were both the youngest of our sizable families, she the only girl with 3 older brothers, and me the youngest by a mile, with 5 brothers and 2 sisters, our birth order was where the similarities ended. In a nutshell, in Susie's house, she was the favorite object of torment and ridicule. For my friend, there existed no meaningful reprieve from what looked like pointless and mundane abuse, primarily at the hands of her sillier-than-average brothers. It wasn't right, the things that they did to her. I can't even remember all that they did. I just remember being confused by their inability to perceive her basic humanity. They treated her more as if she were a stray animal they permitted refuge in their home. They didn't trust her at all, and they used the lack of reliability they observed within her as reason for actively keeping her down. I remember being appalled that they had contrived a means of conserving their combined older brother boogers in a cereal bowl. And Susie could have just been making this up, but anyway, they did corroborate, and they told me they were going to make her eat them at some point. I don't know when. These stories kind of lingered, they hung inside of me, and they were a horror. I could not recall my own person being consciously attacked or demeaned by my older siblings. All of them not one of them had ever made a sport of reducing me to nothing. And there was definitely some teasing and some roughhousing, and sometimes things got out of hand with maybe some spit and, some kind of like the knuckles and, things like that, squeezing the knees and stuff like that. None of them ever went out of their way to actually hurt me. And actually, some of my older siblings actually did seek to elevate me a little bit. It was never over the top. They mainly made me feel good by finding in me a sort of unsuspecting ally. I was sort of a strange kid in that way. Older people seemed to trust me, maybe more than they should have, but I never felt it was excessive, but I got a lot I was a confidant, I guess, for older people. It was odd. Anyway, my siblings seemed to need me, and to my small kid self, their implicit approval of who I was made all the difference. Anyway, because of my modest good fortune, Susie was kind of jealous of me, and I always felt secretly bad about that. But what could I do? To make matters worse, as time went on, Susie also took to behaving in ways I considered to lack a fundamental dignity, doing things to not only reduce, but to multiply her misery. We weren't even in 4th grade, and I felt a sort of despair in my response to her. Like I knew there was nothing I could do to get her to take herself more seriously. You probably want an example. I should probably give you one. For instance, she would wear her mother's bra, which was pretty large. I'm sure her mother had a big, huge brassiere. It was at least a C cup, but it was one of those big, old-fashioned kind of big bras, and she would wear that to school and stuff it full of a lot of stuffing. But the toilet paper would be coming out the top of her shirt, and she would have like a button-up shirt, and it was just, then all of the kids would like be teasing her, and it was just agony for me to see that. I'm ashamed to admit this, but sort of not really, but I am. At school, I wasn't in her class, I remember. We never seemed to be in the same class. But anyway, I remember just not wanting to let people know that we were friends outside of school, which is, I'm sure, pretty common. But anyway, that's the kind of thing that she would do. Just essentially make a complete laughingstock out of herself at school. So anyway, over time, her foolish behavior began to interfere with my ability to respect her. I could not understand, well, I could understand her being smaller and the victim of older siblings with stunted imaginations and poor impulse control. That made sense. They did hurt her. But what confused me was that she seemed to feel like compelled to add insult to her pre-existing injury. Something in Susie seemed to take, she just seemed to be compelled to take control of her life, I guess, in this way. Maybe she thought that if she turned from a mere victim to a more dynamic inventor of her sorrow, that would improve things for her. In time, life would even the score between us, and I would certainly take my own knocks. And I'm not going to go into that now, but just know they came pretty bad. But when you're a kid, you don't imagine things will ever change. So I remember when we rode to the store, the drugstore, on our bikes in the summer. It was hot, and she wore a faded winter coat with deep pockets. I remember it was heavy and brown corduroy, and the inside was like matted, sort of fake sheep kind of fabric. Anyway, she would go into the store and she would stuff those pockets full of candy while I waited outside with our bikes in the hot parking lot. And later we would ride swiftly to our elementary school and park our bikes, and we would crawl inside these gigantic old tires that were stacked on top of each other to make a sort of repurposed play structure for the kids. And we hid inside the circular tubes. And I remember it was very echoey in there and dark. It was like we crawled back into a little womb. Anyway, Susie always shared her stolen candy with me in there. Later on, we smoked cigarettes. I thought it was really sweet of her. She never got on me for not stealing the candy on my own. She was just happy that I was with her. I didn't want Susie to be weak. That was a problem for me. I wanted her to be strong. It didn't occur to me that I needed to go out and be her champion and she was, being taken down. Nobody talked about bullying or anything like that, really, when I was growing up. There really just wasn't a lot of bullying as far as I recall, the way it's discussed now. She was really behaving ridiculously at school. And I think she did that because she wanted attention. She needed attention. And the teacher that she got the most attention from in 6th grade, I think it was, the one I remember the most, was just one of those really sweet 70s kind of hippie teachers. really cute. And I remember thinking, oh, everybody liked that teacher. And that teacher really wanted to go to bat for her, for Susie. And I remember thinking, she doesn't understand. Susie needs somebody to help her be strong. Anyway, when I think about the candy now and how Susie stole the candy and I didn't, I think in a way it was maybe my way of saying, Susie, you're the strong one. You know, she had the courage to do that. And I had been caught stealing candy one time when I was 5 and was talked to by the store manager, and I was terrified to steal candy. And I also, I that wasn't something I was going to do. I didn't see myself as doing that, but I respected her in a way when she went in and she got the candy. And it was our little secret. In those moments, she was my leader.